Hello, I'm Billy, and welcome to.
I'm Matt, and this is the Saga the Clone Saga, a podcast presented by.
And I'm Mike, by the students of S.H.I.E.L.D.
And I'm Vincent, and this is the podcast where we read and talk about the entire infamous 1990s Spider-Man Clone Saga, plus other stuff, but we're done with that first part today.
Yeah, it's the conclusion of Season 2.
And real quickly, before Billy does a little segment, one of our sponsors today is Old English Malt Liquor. And I don't have, they were not kind enough to send sample bottles for us to try, but I'm pouring one out for Ben Riley.
And our second sponsor is Little Ben. He's been with us for a while, but we might have to say goodbye today.
No, we're saying goodbye today.
Well, we're saying goodbye, and then we'll bring him back in 20 episodes, and Billy has to switch the costumes again. That's gonna be fun.
Yeah,
I can't wait till we get to Kane Scarlet Spider, and he's gonna have to change Little Ben into that costume and like make one himself.
Ooh, that could be a special episode. Is we'll have arts and crafts.
Arts and crafts. Costume Spider-Man for your Ken doll with Billy.
Yep. So today, this episode is Revelations. Was this revelatory?
Yeah, I think it was revelatory.
So this is the epic 4-part crossover, which closes the Clone Saga. I'd like to say that, as far as I can tell, during the era of the Clone Saga, while we're still in the 90s, only 3 clone-related things were collected in trade. They had like some weird trade. Well, it was called like the original Clone Saga. And way back when we read the Jerry Conway stuff, we read a book that's also called the original Clone Saga, but that's like this fat book. But the Marvel put one out in the 90s, which is probably only collects like around 144 to 150, if that. None of the spectacular stuff, none of the lead up stuff, and anything like that. And they collected Lost Years.
Oh, good.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And they collected Revelations. And so, really, I don't know. You could kind of read Lost Years and Revelations.
Prologue and the end.
Yeah. So 4-part epic. The 5th part is oversized, which we'll get to, and we start in Spectacular 240. And I don't like this cover. Honestly, I don't really like 3 of these 4 covers. I don't think are that good.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
And the art for 3 of these 4 issues also not that good.
I'd say 2 out of 4.
Yeah.
But so the cover here and the interiors, Luke Ross. This cover, he's trying to go for like this weird metaphorical web thing where there's a giant web and there's someone's hand because there's a big bad that we've been teasing, and all in the little sections of the web are all these people in Peter Parker's life and Ben Reilly's.
Is this a holographic cover? Because it totally looks like it was a holographic cover.
Think so. I think all of these might actually be slightly holographic because the final cover is a little weird looking too.
Of course.
And Spectacular is written by Todd Zago, who at this point is writing 2 out of the 4 books. He's also in Sensational. And so getting into the issue, Seward Trainer is reviving Gaunt. And the mastermind is revealed to Trainer, but not to us yet. But it's a big deal to Trainer. He recognizes him, so it's someone that matters.
Right.
And then we get into Pete and MJ, and it is Halloween time, which matches up.
Yeah, well, this matched up really well.
Obviously, it'll say the date also on YouTube when we upload it, but it is October 24th as we record this. And MJ and Pete, they're arguing about Looney Tunes characters, and the lettering later on spells tunes wrong in the context of the Looney Tunes. And I wasn't sure if that was on purpose because it's like a slightly iffy copyright kind of thing, even though it shouldn't be, or if the letterer fucked up and doesn't know how tunes is spelled in Looney Tunes.
I thought I just meant tunes in general, like cartoons.
That's what I thought, because they can't come out and say Looney Tunes probably for a copyright like that.
I think you can mention it in stuff. Like you're not allowed to advertise Looney Tunes. And they're just like flirting, and it's kind of cringy, but it's sort of fine with me. Like I didn't think it was terrible, and also again we're talking about Peter Parker here, so he's never gonna have this super romantic dialogue.
Yeah,
I just like how their flirting is interrupted by MJ's bus arriving, and you later find out that Ben was riding on top of the bus. And if you go back and look, you can see him just on top of the bus.
Oh yeah,
But
you can.
there's no way you would notice it on your first like just glancing through it. But he's just like prone on top of the bus, just in the background, and I think it's pretty hilarious.
But real quick, before Pete switches companions for the day, they talk about how their baby will be the happiest and most loved in the world. And Pete and Ben, they're total bros. And like we were talking about how there was a moment where this relationship dynamic shifted pretty significantly. But at this point, we're a few arcs into that, and they're just like super friendly with each other, and I like it.
I still feel like it comes off really forced. I don't
really. I don't think it's forced. I like it a lot. Yeah, I think it works.
And then we have a few subplots developing. Liz Osborn leaves Ben Urich a note to meet at the Daily Bugle.
Also, the lettering for that note goes off of the panel.
Yeah. And there's actually a few lettering frustrations. Well, really just one major one, which I'll get to. But Ben Urich references the legacy. Well, the editor references the Legacy of Evil one-shot, which is kind of like a bridge between the DeMatteis, Harry Osborn Green Goblin stuff, and then Tom DeFalco repurposing the Green Goblin for Phil Urich. And that one-shot was written by Kurt Busiek, which is one of his rare contributions to like current set Spider-Man stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But Liz gets a letter from Ben to meet. And so all these people are getting letters, and it's kind of confusing. And Seward Trainer, he's running away from Gaunt, who has. Oh yeah. No, I didn't skip that. So we haven't seen revived Gaunt yet, but Trainer's running away from him, and he's wearing an X-Men hat, which it's the 90s. The X-Men are really big, but I don't think any character in the Marvel universe should ever be having an X-Men logo anywhere on their clothing. It kind of defeats the whole premise of the X-Men.
What about a Fantastic Four shirt?
Yeah, that's fine.
Absolutely.
Fantastic Four shirt works. Like this has actually been shown once or twice in the books, but like in my opinion, the Baxter Building should have a gift shop on the first.
Oh, it does. It's in the Mark Waid and Morango run.
I love it.
But people should not have X-Men hats. Maybe if you're like a homeless drug addict and gay.
To be fair, that's what Seward Trainer looks like right now.
Yeah.
But Trainer is trying to run and tell Ben about the mastermind behind all this. And there's a quick thought bubble with some hinting where Trainer's like, oh, clone, clone, clone. Maybe I deceived them. But he's caught by the rejuvenated Gaunt.
Whose dialogue is unreadable.
Yeah.
I didn't
do that. Is awful.
I skipped the dialogue. I did not. I was not dealing with that.
He's in a crazy mech suit, and he gets cut off in this sequence right before he reveals his true identity. Which I get. At first, I was like, "Oh, it's super obvious. It's the Spider-Man villain who wears a stupid mech suit." But then it's like he literally hasn't appeared since 1960, so I guess it's not obvious at all. So I will also spare the reveal for a second. And then the other subplot, which will eventually lead to one of the most contentious moments, the new daily grind employee, a waitress named Allison Mongrain. And she's just an awkward, cold bitch. That's how they set her up, literally. And again, like, she gets introduced to 2 cooks who work at the daily grind, and this just furthers the theory that after the daily grind was destroyed, there was definitely some insurance going around, which allowed her to expand the business.
Yeah, because she talks about other waitresses that we've never seen before.
Yeah, and then of course in like a one-off panel in like the team up issue or something, it looked like it was a fucking club.
Yeah.
People were dancing there. And then back to Pete and Ben. MJ and Peter, they want more room for the baby and just want to organize things, some nesting habits, some spring cleaning. So he and Ben they're going through the attic. And this is like one of my favorite scenes in the entire Clone Saga.
Mm-hmm.
First, Ben pulls out a photograph of, quote unquote, himself and Uncle Ben and Aunt May. And he's just like starts crying, and Pete's like, I know, I miss them too. And it's just like these 3 panels, and I'm like, that's fucking like really emotional for this Spider-Man 1996 bullshit.
Okay, but kind of all of these issues are really emotional.
Yeah.
What?
As far as looking around in this attic for dumb Easter eggs, somehow young Peter Parker has a Hulk action figure, which doesn't make any sense.
I didn't notice that. That's weird.
There's also an R2-D2, also a Spock action figure,
and a skateboard. So Amazing Spider-Man was right.
Yeah, and a skateboard.
Did you just defend that movie again the
No,
dumbest way
no.
possible?
No, I don't like Amazing Spider-Man.
You don't get to talk for 5 minutes.
I like
But
Amazing Spider-Man.
also, there's like, it's in the later sequence, which may not even actually be in this issue, but there's like a weird, like, shitty looking lockjaw kind of thing, and I couldn't tell if it was supposed to be lockjaw. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about.
Nope.
And they're going through a lot of books, which it's basically like the most generic, like, kind of young male classics you can think of, like Robinson Crusoe and everything like that, but also The Hobbit.
But in public domain and can use.
Yeah. And Pete and Ben's like, how did we read all these books? And Pete's like, oh yeah, you don't remember? We're fucking nerds. And I thought that was funny. And
This whole scene's really cute.
yeah, and I just like, especially toward the one of the final sequences of this, where they're talking, the way they're talking about their shared memories, like in this specific way, and they're using words like we, like accepting that both of their memories, they both have them, but they're both valid, and so they really do come off like brothers. Because they don't say the word clone in this sequence at all. I mean, I think they do. There's a moment where it's like, oh no, both our memories are legit, but like it's just like a really genuine scene.
It is.
And then another emotional moment is Pete tells Ben how Aunt May knew that they were Spider-Man, and Ben's like, that's okay that you didn't tell me. And
it's a little more emotional than that, but
and the Daily Bugle is hiring 2 janitors, which they don't even do background checks on because they have great recommendation letters from Oscorp and Multivex. Which, if you're a janitor, do you even do they have recommendation letters?
Every place has
recommendations. Great janitors, but I don't
know. Tweet at your janitor friends.
Yes.
Do they get recommendation letters?
And also, it's not clear because they're hired, and the way it's not even Jonah, whoever they're talking to, like the head of the maintenance staff, explains that they need the staff because people quit. And he says quit, but the Bugle is struggling and just laid a shitload of people off.
But
and so
they have enough money to hire 2 janitors.
Yeah, well, and before that, why is anyone quitting? I mean, maybe it's like, all right, the sink shipping, let me jump off. But also, again, not to denigrate them, but you're a janitor.
No, they quit.
Well, yeah, exactly.
They forcibly quit. Jonah made them quit.
And then the Mecha Gaunt kills Seaward Trainer. He just murders him. Seaward Trainer's dead.
Gaunt does not kill him.
No, God doesn't kill him.
Big
Yeah,
Bad kills him.
Okay. Well, I wasn't even entirely clear because there's like this weird close up on like Gaunt's weapon kind of thing.
Gaunt throws him to the side, and then you see in the reflection of Gaunt's one weird robot eye that the big bad is strangling Seward.
Oh, okay. I missed the reflection. I thought it was just a really shitty close-up panel.
it actually looks like he breaks his neck, and it's kind of a shame that the sound effect they went for was crack and not snap, but whatever.
And then they do zoom out, and we see the big bad, but there's not really any big clues here besides the fact that he's probably human. He's not wearing any significant kind of costume or anything like that. And he tells Gaunts to go kill Ben Reilly in front of Peter Parker and to separate Peter from MJ that night. And so the plan is set, and cut back to Ben and Peter. They're playing Battleship in the attic, just having fun, when MJ calls up and asks them to join for dinner at the Daily Grind. And someone is at their answering machine, which I couldn't, like, I couldn't actually tell this. Is someone downstairs at the answering machine, or is someone hacking into it?
I assumed it was like a tap or something, but I have no idea.
It has to be a tap because he's tapping him, because otherwise he's downstairs and then runs to a different building.
Which, to be fair, kind of hilarious.
Yeah, but like I kind of knew that they were going to fight in a building, so I thought for a second he was downstairs. So moving into the second part in Sensational 11, we have a very cartoony Ringo cover of Gaunt terrorizing Ben and Peter. And I mean, it's just fine. I just think this Robot Master design is fucking awful.
It's bad.
And it's just really stupid looking. And if anything, I feel like, I mean, I guess a different design might have worked better, but I don't know that Michael Ringo's style really fits like this weird mecha kind of deal. It makes it look more stupid than it should, and it's already stupid in the first place.
Yeah.
Todd DeZago also writing this book. So he writes the first 2 parts. And we have more of the big bad. He's in shadow, so there's no huge hint. In fact, there's even a profile shot where you see the side of his head, and you always expect the slight ridges, and they're sort of there, but I feel like
there. Yeah, but like on the top.
It's still not like 100% obvious who this is.
Did you see in the previous issue when they cut to Liz Allen on the phone with Foggy Nelson, the photo of the person, it says our founder, even there in shadow, so like they're very trying to like not even direct your attention to who it is.
But I mean, there's like, they're dragging it out, but there's a lot of hinting and like little Easter eggs and stuff in just all of these issues.
Yeah.
And I think some of them are done really well, and we'll get to some of those. But in this sequence is where we get a partial reveal for Gaunt, because the mastermind says Mendel, refers to him as Mendel. And it's not like hyped up at all. It's not like this big thing, because again, even if you're a giant Spider-Man fan, that might not click at this moment.
No, like why would it? You know, Mendelstrom, we haven't seen him in 40 years or whatever.
And then, but the scene is kind of solely because then the mastermind refers to this person, Mendel's first of all, they use the word revivified, not revived, revivified. And he says your pre-revivified Gaunt form. And like in a way where he's using Gaunt not as his code name, but as an adjective.
Right.
Which of course I guess is why why his code name is Gaunt, but it just sounds so stupid when he says it like that. And the janitors, they're mucking around. They have the Daily Bugle elevators out of order. Pete has a beeper in case MJ goes into labor, which is kind of cool. I guess that makes sense. I wonder if lots of people did that in this kind of complete proliferation of cell phones era. And Pete and Ben, they're moaning about Onslaught still, which it's interesting to see. Like the Onslaught tie-ins were like 2 episodes ago. But it's interesting to see how they actually are in this giant finale acknowledging that this other major event happened. Whereas today, like, I don't know. I mean, I guess they would do that. But like, I mean, I guess like, for example, Slot's giant finale references Secret Empire, sort of, with some of the auto stuff. But
I think it's really cool to see Ringo draw a lot of these Marvel characters. I think the Fantastic Four especially look great. I'd love to see him draw an FF book.
Yeah, we get another silhouette shot. And Ben and Pete are like, the world still needs heroes. And also, I think it's funny how they're like, there's no hope left. And that was also the conclusion at like the final Onslaught tie-in. And it's like, what is Marvel trying to say about, oh, we just killed all our characters and now there's no hope left in the world?
They're saying their books suck.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
But buy X-Men Spider-Man, please.
Yeah. I mean, they're still selling. And so Pete says, oh, maybe I can just be Spider-Man again. But both of us. And Ben is like, wait, you're about to have a child. And Pete just kind of totally dodges that question. Which, again, that's like the eternal debate. And we all have our opinions on that. I don't think he necessarily needs to. I don't think that's as big an issue as most people present it as, but he just totally ignores it here.
Mm-hmm.
And the other lingering question is, how are his powers? And so he just jumps around a tree and is like, I can jump around trees. My powers are back.
Yeah, sure, I guess.
And then Arthur Stacy comes into the story.
For no reason.
The brother of George Stacy, uncle of Gwen Stacy. And I think, was he hinted? He was like very, very briefly hinted before, right?
He was. And at the time, I don't remember. I might have said that this was the first time we've seen him, and that was just straight up wrong because he did debut back in like Main Spider-Man 90 something.
Early 90s. But he hasn't been, but it's Amazing Spider-Man 90 something, and then jump all the way to the Clone Saga.
Yeah.
And he's shown up at the NYPD because he wants to track down Spider-Man, who allegedly kills his brother. And while they're at the precinct, Mike, who's getting arrested?
Harley Quinn and the Joker.
Yeah, and the Harley costume is pretty on point.
We got a Harley thing in these books.
Yeah, I mean, I guess she's kind of big at this point.
Is this the Bendis arresting gag before Bendis did it? Did Bendis get that from the Clone Saga?
Maybe. I mean, you have to fully think through. Bendis is like drawing his own like very, very low tier indie comics at this point, I believe.
Yeah.
Bendis is like, he's probably almost homeless. And then we're getting more characters are getting the invite to the Daily Bugle party. Flash Thompson and Betty Brant. We check in with Flash Thompson every once in a while, and we did have that scene forever ago where goop monsters invaded his gym class, but I didn't realize he was in Hoboken, or maybe he moved between stories to get away from his gym class getting attacked by goop monsters.
I mean, that's a pretty good reason.
And Betty Brant's letter is signed O. And there's no reference to any of the other letters being signed a particular way. Well, some of them are like double-crossed from each other, alleged. Well, that's how it's set up. But there's another big hint, which is kind of obvious. And I don't know why it would be Betty Brant with that letter. I mean, with the signature.
I don't know.
Then some kids, they're reenacting Onslaught in an abandoned house. But later they call it a school, whatever, it's a building. So Ben and Peter, their spider sense goes off, so they run in and say, get the hell out of this abandoned house. It's going to collapse on your head. And I'll just skip ahead a tiny bit and reveal that these damn kids are fucking robots.
Yeah, it's pretty dumb. I kind of love it.
And then things start ramping up towards the end of this issue. MJ and Anna, they're waiting at the grind. MJ is really hungry because she's a pregnant woman, very close to delivery. So Allison Mongrain, the new waitress, slips some kind of powder into her gumbo, which induces labor or maybe something worse. And so she runs off to the hospital. She's taken off to the hospital. And then Mendel Strom finally fully reveals himself. And Ben remembers who Strom worked for. And the footnote here is Amazing Spider-Man 36, which is entirely false. It's 37. And Mendel Strom, as I said, has not appeared between Amazing Spider-Man 37 and this. And now I'll kick it to Matt. Do you remember what the hell happened in that? Is he supposed to be dead? That's my major question.
No, I don't remember at all.
Okay.
God, we have him running spider bites and he's just useless.
Look, Amazing Spider-Man 37 is not very memorable. Like at least 38 had Joe. Joe's the greatest villain. 37, no idea what happens in it.
Is Joe the looter? Or is the looter separate?
No, the looter's separate. Joe's just a guy named Joe.
Okay.
And for more great content like this, follow Matt's Instagram for daily spider bites.
Well, when I'm reading it every day, I do know what happens in the book.
That's your tagline.
Third part, Amazing Spider-Man 418, another big Robot Master cover. It's kind of very identical to the last one, and it's also not interesting.
I'd say it's a little worse because it's not Ringo.
How could we not get Bagley back for this?
Well, he's gone. I mean, it wasn't a matter of him getting back. The last two issues.
We didn't even have who was doing it last issue? It was Ron Garney. How the hell do we not have either of those guys back for this?
All right. Well, so what are your guys' thoughts on the art in this issue?
Bad.
Terrible.
That's interesting. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with you. This is the new ongoing artist on Amazing Spider-Man, Steve Skroce. And Steve Skroce got his start on Ecto Kid, a book in Clive Barker's Marvel imprint Razor line, which was written by the Wachowski siblings as some of their earliest media. And after that, he did a half year on cable, then launched X-Man during Age of Apocalypse with Jeff Loeb. And he's on Amazing Spider-Man from this issue, 418 through 428.
All right.
And he leaves Amazing Spider-Man, like the best-selling book in comic books, and he goes off to do a Youngblood relaunch. And guess who wrote that Youngblood comic?
Alan Moore.
Correct. And Alan Moore and Steve Skroce's Youngblood only lasts 2 issues.
Wow.
So then Skroce...
Give it up for Steve Scrotum, everyone.
He crawls back to Marvel to launch the first Gambit ongoing, draws that for a year,
Right.
and then Marvel somehow allows him to draw and write an arc of Wolverine called Blood Debt.
That's
And
like every other Wolverine arc called.
somewhere in that time period, he also drew preliminary concept art and storyboards for The Matrix with his old friends, the Wachowskis. And they used his concept art to sell the movie to studios.
Did they bring him back for the Matrix tie-in comic?
I didn't know there was a Matrix tie-in comic, but he didn't draw it. But they've used him for other concept art on future movies as well. And he, like I just said, he disappeared for quite a while doing concept art. But within the past few years, Brian K. Vaughan dug him up to do an image book called We Stand on Guard, which was, I would say, very well received critically.
Well, it's by Brian K. Vaughan. I mean, he's the greatest writer of our time.
Yeah. It's like a Canadian Revolutionary War kind of thing with mechs. I don't understand it.
Interesting.
Revolutionary War, but like in the near future. So like Canada rebelling against something.
It doesn't matter, but because Brian K. Vaughan's name's on it, it's automatically the greatest thing ever.
Yep. So MJ, she's in the hospital. Her regular doctor's out of town, quote unquote. That's the loose end. What happened to him?
He dead.
He's dead.
Norman ate him also.
I feel like the question of whether this replacement doc is shady or not is a serious question up until almost the very end.
This dude's pretty shady.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I couldn't tell if it was just coincidence that he's like a weird-looking fat dude who then says, quote, everything is going exactly as planned, and Norman Osborn is in the corner smirking. But like, he could just be a totally normal, reassuring doctor.
No, he's totally not.
I don't know. I was questioning it. I think it would be more
questioning it.
It would be more interesting if everyone in the room was totally normal except for Allison Moncrief, who I guess is acting as a nurse sort of in the room. But also the one person who is legit in the room is Angela Yin, Daily Bugle photographer. She was there. She was at the hospital for some other reason, and she's being nosy, and so she passes the news along to Robbie. And that doesn't really add anything at all. I mean, there's a quick moment where Robbie's like, oh, wow, Pete's been through a lot of shit. But it doesn't really add anything, in my opinion.
No, it's ultimately pointless.
Back to the Spiders versus Strom fight. We get a Dave Matthews Band reference, which I did not need. And back to
it's no Hootie and the Blowfish, but
yeah, exactly. These robot kids, they have personalities, and it's really fucking creepy.
And they have names. This one kid's name is Willis, which he's named that just so he can have a "what you talking about" Willis joke. And I hate it. I really hate that.
Were you a big fan of that show as a kid, Matt?
No, I've never watched this. No.
I just wanted to know if you ever watched the show.
Matt, do you hate the reference more or less because it's made to a talking head?
Oh, definitely more. Oh, 100% more.
Okay.
But there's a fun sequence where Pete calls Aunt Anna while he's fighting the robot children, and while on the phone twists this kid's neck with his feet. It's a great visual of Spider-Man.
If you saw that out of context, it's just him snapping a kid's neck.
And just to point out, the kid also happens to be African American. So Spider-Man being a real menace out of context in this scene.
Although, to be fair, the kid also has fire coming out of his eyes. So,
and Strom is like kind of pulling them along with dumb hints about what the hell's going on. And Ben's guesses for the big bad are the Jackal, Mysterio, or the Kingpin, which none of those are plausible at all.
And the Mysterio makes robots sometimes, and like the Jackal, I'm sure is Ben's first guess every time. He trips and falls down the stairs, goes Jackal, like.
We're so far away that I don't even honestly remember like the full conclusion of the Jackal. I think he died on panel. I don't even remember. And then the Kingpin, I'm not actually certain of his exact status quo at this point, but through all the mob arcs and everything, it's been clearly set up that he's kind of down and out. So the bugle party is set up, and the weird janitors are going around setting up jack-o'-lanterns, and we see one of them has a countdown charge on it. Very, very subtle. Let's put bombs in the pumpkins. I wonder who the bad guy is.
Jack-o'-lantern.
Yeah.
And basically this fight ends with Ben getting very mad and stripping down Mendelstrom. He just takes off all his clothes, which are made of metal. And after hearing that Strom killed Trainer, oh no, that's what motivates Ben to go crazy. And then Pete rushes off to go to MJ, I guess, but I don't think he actually. No, he rushes off to go to the Bugle, I guess.
I don't know. He rushes off.
He rushes off. Yeah, he rushes off to go see MJ, I guess. Then the big bad shows up, and he's like very clearly on panel for several panels, and we see his face, but we don't see his face. This is where the art like really fell apart for me, because it's just a blank-faced person instead of like being creative with shadows or obstructions. It's really stupid looking.
Yeah, it's pretty lazy.
And earlier we've seen this guy wearing weird white gloves and stuff. And I don't remember if it was clear in this scene whether he's wearing the gloves. But Matt, how the hell do Green Goblin's finger lasers work? In this scene, it looks like he's just shooting them out of his bare fingers, to me.
He shouldn't be able to do that. They're in his gloves.
Okay. But he has finger lasers. He neutralizes Ben and seemingly kills Mendelstrom, who does not die. In fact, you can check up on him in recent issues of Amazing Spider-Man in 2018, where he does die. Allegedly.
Is it really, really good?
Then this issue, then we get into the infamous ending, which we have joked about constantly. We're in the hospital. MJ asks why her baby isn't crying, and for like this one page, it's a cheap thing, but this is an emotional scene.
I thought it was extremely impactful, honestly. Like this hit me.
It's really good.
I really expected to come into this issue and make a joke about it, but I honestly can't.
I mean, I'm still going to in about 5 minutes, but
yeah,
for right
I'm
now,
not gonna make one on this episode, but I think probably somewhere down the line.
Then Allison Mongrain, the Daily Grind waitress, which does MJ like not have any peripheral vision? She's not trying to like she's not looking at the nurses, which may have just delivered her stillborn baby.
She's crying. Her baby's dead.
I know, but look around.
Not in the room, Vince. She's outside it.
No, well,
Yeah, she leaves the room.
No, she's in the room and then she leaves the room.
Yeah,
but she doesn't take off the mask until she's outside it.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. But
So
she has a distinct hairstyle, style and color of her hair.
But she was wearing. But she was. If you look at the photo, the drawing, she's got like a wrap on her head, so you can't see the blonde highlights.
But she's pushing a cart, and she drives it to a dock, meets with the big bad, who let's handle the reveal, and then talk about the craziness.
Yeah.
The big bad drum roll, is Norman Osborn with
Oh my god!
with a very skinny cigar.
Yeah.
That's not a cigar. That's just a blunt.
Yeah. But it's Norman Osborn.
He's smoking up to get ready for his feast.
And
really the green goblin now.
Yeah.
It all makes sense.
as a reminder, and we are reminded in a footnote eventually, he should be totally dead as of Amazing Spider-Man 132. And then what
Or
happened?
123.
Yeah, 122. 122. I
Yeah.
said 132, but it's 122. But back to the baby, quote unquote. Alison Mongrain, she's going to Europe, and the package, it's referred to as the package, will never be seen or heard from again. But to me, like, I had never paid super close attention to this page. To me, it's very clear that she takes the baby with her, and she's holding it like on her breast, which to me implies that it's totally alive.
Yeah.
You don't carry a corpse baby like this, like swaddled up. So she is carrying a live child of Peter Parker and Mary Jane and takes it to Europe to never be heard from again.
Which is really crazy considering that when we get to the JMS run and how much of like the past stuff with Norman is brought up with that, like in Sin's Past and stuff with Gwen Stacy, how it's kind of weird how in that time frame when they were doing all that, they never brought the baby back because that would have been kind of the time to do it.
Well, I mean, it's because Norman Osborn ate it.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, all right. Well,
Like if you were timing 5 minutes, there's the joke.
at some point that joke arose about Norman Osborn killing
I know
possibly.
where it arose. We were sitting in Willard one night, and I asked, "Hey, whatever did happen to the baby?" And Matt just, without missing a beat, going, "No, Norman ate it."
Well, I'm trying to think where does that come from? Did we steal that joke from someone, or did we come up with it? Why did we come up with
in
it?
the history of Spider-Man, a lot of children get eaten.
I thought I made it up, but I could have subconsciously taken it for something else. I don't know.
I attribute it to Matt's creation because that's where I first heard it from.
But I mean, to be fair, it's not really what happens in the issue at all.
No, it's not.
No, it's really not.
That's why I was really trying to think where the hell that came from.
I'll be honest, I was kind of disappointed when I got to this page and he takes the baby to Europe. I'm like, well, what, normally we go to Europe to eat it, or did my joke not work anymore?
Yeah, I was like, it totally doesn't even, like, there's no way you can spin it to where he could eat it.
No, I'm super upset.
Okay, but to comment on what actually happens with this baby, one, it totally grows up to be Spider-Man UK, and two, the reason they haven't commented on it is because I think most people just like assume that the baby dies. Like we're basing it being alive on this single panel of a silhouette of a woman holding what we assume is a baby to her chest. Like, there's no way that they went back and looked at this one panel and thought, maybe they intended the baby to still be alive.
I figured it out. The baby's a clone. Norman ate the real baby, and the clone baby went to Europe.
That's a stretch. Why would you send the clone baby to Europe?
So he could eat the real one.
Yeah. He's a monster. He wants to eat the real one.
But I mean, why make the clone baby?
Exactly.
To raise it as his new son.
Or he gets it crazy.
Harry was such a disappointment that he decided to make it.
Yes.
When we got to Dark Reign, they really should have done something with this. Like, just have him be like, it's like a wedding cake. He eats a piece of it every single year.
Oh, that's gross.
No, but I think it is like, I mean, the JMS point is there, but also not there because JMS focused more on the marriage and the relationship after a period when they were trying to duck that. But also, of course, something happens at the end of the JMS run and the people behind the scenes pulling the strings during the JMS run, they never would have brought back this baby. But it's totally interesting that I'm convinced that like the drawing of these final panels, the baby is alive in this issue. I'm
Yeah.
like 99% convinced on that.
No, I agree.
And so there is a total loose thread there.
Which then makes me like, which it's just weird because Slot never picked up on it.
Yeah. But then here's the other question: the Stacy twins weren't they hiding in Europe?
Yes.
Yeah. So Norman Osborn just has he just sends children to Europe.
When Norman is out of ideas and exhausted all options, you're going to a boarding school in Europe.
And
Wait.
he was hiding in Europe too.
Yeah.
And so was Harry.
Yeah.
In the One More Day retcon.
It's just the perfect place to hide. Europe.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be so oh my god, wouldn't that be so fucked up if like someone could go and still totally retcon this? Like they raised the baby, like he raised the baby in Europe?
Yeah.
I'm surprised Slot didn't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing is, I mean, I'll do it in the middle of this story arc, but we have several loose ends from the Clone Saga, and some of them get treated and some of them don't. And none of them are huge. Like, no one expects them to be brought back with. But of course, there's this baby. But then also, you have Ben Reilly's girlfriend, who I guess is in prison.
She's not really important.
I know she's not important, but like anyone can bring her back at any moment. And then there's Jessica, which obviously Ben's dead, whatever. There's no like romantic plot there. But again,
it's Jessica Jones.
She's the daughter of the burglar that killed Uncle Ben. Like, that's pretty.
Who cares? That's the thing.
All right. So back to this story. We have the finale, Spider-Man 75. But I'll note that this is not Spider-Man 75. This is actually now Peter Parker Spider-Man 75. They decided to tack on 2 words to the title of this book on the final issue of this crossover and the final issue of the Clone Saga.
Sure.
This issue, it's a double-sized anniversary issue, and it's not even, it doesn't say double-sized because we're finishing the Clone Saga. It said double-sized anniversary, but it's a 75. You don't celebrate that. Like 100, yes. 50, sure. Maybe even 25 when you know your book's not going to last them.
They're doing a lot with 25s now. All the DC Rebirth titles had oversized issues for 25.
Well, yeah, because they're not going to last super long at this point. But like 75, don't do that. And then this opening scene, it's just trying to be a little like teasy, even though the full reveal happened at the end of last issue.
Do you like the people going in the Superman capes?
Well, people going to Superman caves, but also, all right, so Normie Osborn is trick-or-treating in the middle of the day in a park.
No, the middle of the night.
Okay, all right. Well, I couldn't entirely tell.
But his friend is
The
dressed up.
opening panel has a night on which the entire city.
Shut up! We get it. It's nighttime. The panel is drawn dark. It's night. Shut up about it. The streetlights are on. Anyways, his friend is dressed up totally as Dr. Savannah, and I refuse to hear otherwise.
I'll accept that, I guess.
I don't know
But-
what that is.
Vince is blind and can't tell the night from day.
The, one of the most popular Captain Marvel / Shazam villains.
Sure. Okay.
Hey Billy, are you gonna buy the new series when it comes out?
No.
Fake fan then, weren't you there?
No, I'm gonna.
He's like Cap's Lex Luthor, basically.
Mr. Mind's cooler.
But also, I may have just been confused because there are people totally dressed as Superman right next to them in the same panel. But this kid that Normie's with, his mother's name is Lois, and she has dark hair. Am I just totally reaching, or is this a really shitty Lois Lane reference?
Yes. Very shitty Lois Lane.
Yeah.
And so Lois Lane has a child in the Marvel universe.
It's John.
But it's actually pretty interesting. I don't know if the wikis have this set up very well. But Clark Kent and Lois Lane appear like all the fucking time in like Marvel comics of the 70s through the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't do that anymore.
Well, the big prominent one is that Clark Kent shows up in Simonson's Thor.
Yeah. And likewise, Peter Parker is in a lot of DC books. And then, of course, you have Savage Dragon in Spider-Man.
Of course.
That was last episode.
Yes. And Normie recognizes his grandfather for a second, but they split off. And Norman Osborn gives his grandson and his friend candy, just drops it in their bags. And so I really hope that this Lois Lane is like, no, pick out those candies and throw them out, because some totally random stranger just came up to you and gave you candy. But maybe they weren't as concerned in 1996. And
Okay, well, I'd
Norman
like to reiterate. Never once has there ever been a reported case of someone poisoning candy ever. It's never happened.
Well, then I guess I'll be the first.
New record.
This podcast is now
New high score.
used as evidence for when Billy does it.
So Pete finally is able to rush to the hospital, and there's like this 2-page sequence, which I couldn't tell if it was funny or if it was awkward, where everyone in the hospital is totally useless at giving Pete directions. And it's also at a point where it's like, how many of these people are in on it and are misleading him purposely, or are they just ineffectual? I don't know. But he finally gets to the room, and the doctor is in fact shady because he gets drugged. And go into like some of the like kind of artistic stuff. As Pete is passing out, the doctor's face kind of looks like a pumpkin.
And I thought we were going to get Jack-O-Lantern here.
I also thought we were going to get Jack-O-Lantern. I love Jack-O-Lantern.
Of course you do.
Yes, because Venom fucking wrecks his shit all the time.
Yeah.
So, of course, Norman Osborn dresses Pete up in the costume, like his little doll. And it's interesting, the costume, as Peter Parker is in the Spider-Man costume, they emphasize the underwebbing a lot in the end of the story. And I don't think that was really there when he was last wearing the costume in the Clone Saga, or at least very noticeable.
I don't think so.
No.
I kind of took this as really deliberate, because they're trying to visually tell people Spider-Man's back. This is the Spider-Man that you know. You know.
Well, Peter also says, I'm in the costume, the original. So
Yeah.
that's
Well, and
webbing.
I don't think it's even just this is the quote unquote the Spider-Man. It's also Norman's role play, and this is the Spider-Man circa, or like the same Spider-Man of specifically Amazing Spider-Man 122 and stuff like that.
Sure.
And especially with Strom, we're getting callbacks to some of the Ditko era stuff. And Pete first thinks it's Harry Osborn. It's not. It's his dad. And the title, the inside issue title of this issue is The Night of the Goblin. And one of the most iconic scenes of this finale, in my opinion, is when Norman Osborn, as he's spilling all the beans, the info dump on his backstory, he just rips open his shirt to show off his scars. And it's like a whole half page. And I think it's hilarious.
I'd say it's honestly, I think it's one of the most iconic moments from the Clone Saga in general.
I will say it's the thumbnail for this video.
Good.
I really like the page before it of Ramita's shadowing with Spider-Man in like the dark corners. And then Matt will like this because we'll throw it back to when Norman does it in Superior, where Peter goes, "No, not you," to when he knows it's Norman.
Yep.
And then it's inversed in Superior.
And it's a great moment.
Some of that unknown backstory, the Goblin formula includes the healing factor, which allowed him to survive. And Harry Osborn covered entirely for his dad. Or is pretty much, which I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah,
That
I don't
does
like it.
also doesn't make sense.
Entirely, doesn't it? Wasn't his entire motivation on becoming the Green Goblin to avenge his dad?
Well, I mean, when Norman died, Harry was bedridden.
Yeah, he was wigging out on drugs.
So I don't know how he had the you know,
Unless he was totally just playing the whole time.
maybe.
Well, I also just like, was Harry really like characterized as being at odds with Pete and Spider-Man and like being conniving and stuff?
No.
Like, he's on drugs, but he's very close with Peter Parker at this point, as far as
he's on drugs.
Yeah. No, he and Peter are very close. He just like overdoses 2 or 3 times.
And it's very weird. It's very hard for me to believe that he'd be in, like, for a long haul, for him to like even fake that he was doing that for some long-term plan with his dad.
Well, it's not even it's a short-term plan, because then Norman is totally healed or whatever, and he's like, all right, I'm going to go fuck up Peter Parker now. And I guess it's funny the way he explains it. It's almost like he walks in on his son masturbating or something. He walks in on Harry like trying on the Green Goblin costume. And so Norman's like, "Oh, you're going to be a man now." And he's like, "Oh, I'll just go to Europe. The perfect place to hide."
Yeah, I don't buy Harry's involvement in this. Healing factor, fine. Hiding in Europe, sure. I don't buy Harry's involvement at all.
Well, I think they just had like, that's the thing, is that it doesn't fully connect, because he only hides in Europe if he can't immediately seek vengeance on Peter. Because otherwise, as he says, he would have just done it right then.
Right.
And so you have to think of some bullshit reason for him to go to Europe, and then of course there has to be a bullshit reason for the like 3 other Green Goblins in the meantime. Well, like kind of 4.
Mm-hmm.
But and then it's like hilarious, over the top Norman Osborn dress up camp, which is like the best part, where it's like Norman Osborn, he's like one of those villains where it's like he's obsessed with wearing his costume, and occasionally you can read it as like almost sexual gratification kind of thing.
But like even during Dark Reign, when he had the Goblin face painted under the the Iron Patriot armor.
Yeah.
And so this whole scene, as he's like just info dumping us and talking to Pete, he's like slowly slipping on the pieces of his costume, and there's like a close-up shot of him like doing up like his stockings, basically. Because again, and the Green Goblin is one of the other costumes where people argue about how serious it looks, or like how it can translate to film. Obviously, we got a really weird, awful, totally different version for the eventual.
Well, both times we've seen it on film, it looks terrible.
Yeah.
But like in the comics, and you can go back and forth on like how much of it is like a chainmail type of thing and stuff like that. But he's basically just he is literally wearing tights.
Yeah. Right. And I think honestly, as part of his appeal, he's a lunatic. Yeah. Throughout the Green Goblin, throughout this entire issue, is a great villain. I really like who wrote this? I really like how they wrote him. Was it Saga? Mackie?
I don't. Yeah, I mean, it's Spider-Man. It's Howard Mackie, but I couldn't catch the credits in this issue. I don't know if our scan accidentally removed them.
It just says a Stanley presentation, the Night of the Goblin.
Oh, also, just
special
real quick,
thanks to Glenn Greenberg. That's it.
He's just like
and then another Mark Grunwald shout out.
Yeah, in this issue, but not the other 3, which is interesting.
Yeah, it is Mackie. Wow. Okay, good on him.
But yeah, he's putting on his costume and he's just beating the shit out of Pete. And Pete, I thought this was funny, where as part of Norman's rant, he's like, "You killed my son," and Pete's like, "Well, that's not quite how it happened." But then he's like, "Well, you're not going to believe me anyway, so let me just stop talking.
Yep.
Let me focus on the fight."
I do want to say though, Matt pointed out that Mackey's writing in this is usually good. This is the best John Romita Jr.'s art has looked for a while. I can almost see him like maybe kind of rush the last couple issues, so this issue would look really, really good. Since he does work on his self-described deadline style, so
He does some really cool stuff with shadows in this.
Yeah, there's one panel specifically that I keep looking at. It's like in the middle of when Spider-Man's getting his ass whooped during the exposition, and it's like it's really fucking good. Like half of his face is lit up by what I presume is the jack-o'-lantern, and then the other half is covered in shadow.
Yeah.
And like legitimately good lighting, which for a long time in these comics we have not seen. And so it's really refreshing to look at.
It's beautiful.
there's the scenes where we'll get to later when Spider-Man's jumping out of the window and like the lights are like hitting the costume just right. And there's one panel where Spider-Man's hanging off the side of a building, shooting out a web as like there's a bunch of broken glass behind him, and you can see the full like web pits. It looks so cool.
Yeah.
So the bugle party is off to a good start with the phones cut, the elevators broken, the fire door is locked, so everyone is now trapped in the city room.
This is my kind of party.
And we get some very brief character moments where Jonah and Robbie are basically like, yeah, some shit's definitely going on, but let's not tell everyone else because they'll freak the fuck out. Ben Urich, he tests to see if the email's working, and it's not, but then he's like, well, I'll just start writing the story about how I might die tonight. And his justification is like, or at least his joke is, I can't get scooped.
Which is kind of funny, but also, like, I think entirely in character for Ben Urich.
Yeah. And then Flash and Betty, they try and reconcile. That doesn't work out.
Well, one of them tries to reconcile.
Yeah. And again, and this is my just obsession with like these melodramatic relationships and everything. Mm-hmm. Betty Brant is kind of sort of dating Ben Reilly right now. Or unless it's totally a one-off date.
That was definitely a one-time thing.
But I mean, regardless, it's not referenced at all.
No.
That's still probably the last thing the two of them did together was go on this date.
The only thing they did together.
Well, yeah. Well, no. He knows Betty Brant.
Yeah, okay.
151.
Yeah.
At least for the next few pages.
Yeah.
Flash and Liz catch up, and I really like this scene too. They're reminiscing about their high school days and Peter Parker and how much they've gone through and changed. Obviously, they've both gone through a ton of shit.
Mm-hmm.
And also evolved a lot as characters. And
a lot.
Now is a good point to remind everyone that Foggy Nelson is here as well, because he's fuck buddies with Liz.
So here's another guy who might be a great stepdad for Normie. We've had like 3 in the stand of this podcast.
Yeah.
He would get a great like friend uncle out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt takes Normie under his wing. I'll read that.
Trains him to be a ninja.
Yeah.
That's better than a shitty Kid Carnage.
The Carnage thing. Oh yeah.
Kid Red Goblin. Yes. I think Jonah notices something across the street, and we cut across the street because, of course, obviously Norman is pulling all these strings, and this is where like the Romita art just goes crazy in a different way, where for several pages we just get these giant panels of Norman and Peter fighting each other. This first one is one of my favorite, where it's Norman holding Peter, and he still doesn't have his mask on quite yet. And this is just a great panel. And I love how Pete pulls the clone card. He's like, hey, none of that was me. I'm the fake one. You were looking for Ben. And Norman's like, "Oh, you mean Ben Riley?" And he just like pulls him out of the shadow like as a unconscious.
Which is great because like the room is now filled with smoke, so he had to have been lying there like to the side of the room the entire time.
Yeah, he's just ready to be used as a prop.
And Norman is just so dramatic. He had him there hiding, just waiting for Pete to bring him up so he can go, yeah.
And in that panel, it looks like Romita has almost drawn fangs on Osborn.
And so here are all the giant retcons and explanations. Norman has been manipulating Miles Warren, Judas Traveler, Seaward Trainer. Pete is the original, and Ben is the clone. And that's it. So it's always been Peter Parker. The whole Amazing Spider-Man 151 thing doesn't matter. But also now, major parts of the last third of the Clone Saga don't make any sense. Also the first third.
And probably the middle third.
Yeah. And then there's a fucking amazing splash page of Norman Osborn finally with his mask on the glider. And it's just like amazing page.
It's really cool.
But I do have to ask, how do you feel about the no pupils on the mask?
I like it.
I don't know. I think I'm cool with that.
It looks different. I like it. Look, it kind of makes him look more insane.
Yeah.
And so
before we go further, the hero Green Goblin, is he still around at this point? Because his book got canceled, right?
Yeah.
But like
in his final issue, he pulled a Spider-Man No More. So he's just like, well, I don't really like this anymore. Let me throw away the costume.
Oh.
And years later, Phil Urich is one of the members of the Loners. Well, the spin-off miniseries was called The Loners, but the group was called Excelsior. And it was a support group for former teenage superheroes. And it ties into, well, it first appears in Runaways.
Yeah.
Alongside Darkhawk and a few other obscure 90s characters. But Phil Urich never, well, we will see Phil Urich again. That's what I'll say. I believe. We will actually see him, right? He's in one of these arcs. Because we're not really reading any of Superior. I think we'll see.
I don't know. What, when he's Hobgoblin?
Yeah.
Willer, I guess.
/ whatever, all his few names.
Yeah.
And so, speaking of insane, Norman's weird motivation is like Peter Parker goes through all this shit, half of which I put him through, but he keeps going. And he has a good life. And my life sucks, mostly because I'm crazy and my son's crazy, but somehow it's Spider-Man's fault. So just to torture Peter even more, he's going to murder everyone in the Bugle with the bombs, but first he just kind of taunts some of them. But before we quite get to that, we have a flashback scene of how Norman turned Ben Riley into a prop. And Romita uses like a totally different art style. And it's like sketchier. The coloring is almost different as well. And I thought this was cool.
It's cool. I don't know why he does it, but it's cool.
Yeah, the fight's pretty decent. Norman Osborn hits Ben Riley over and over with a giant pipe. Slightly reminiscent of like Death in the Family, because he's hitting someone with a giant pipe, similar thing, and it's all the blood splattering up onto his face. The first person he taunts is Jonah, and Jonah recognizes his voice. He's like, "God damn it!" And then this is the weirdest part of this issue for me. Because it doesn't matter. A totally random pedestrian gets a name. This is a new character, Abby Levine, and she does make one more appearance after this. and it was just so weird. Like, why is there any focus on this character? I guess the idea is like they're trying to show like, oh, there's a giant battle in the sky, so some people on the ground are gonna get tangled up in it. And as part of that ground team of sorts, Devin and his mother Shirley from the Daily Grind, as well as Arthur, Stacy, they're rushing to the scene as well. Ben eventually slips out of his costume, gets everyone out of the locked city room, and he uses his spider sense to gather up all the pumpkin bombs and brings them all to the roof. And then I was confused by this. Does Flash Thompson find one that Ben missed, or does his stupid ass touch one of the ones that Ben put on the roof?
I think he found one that Ben missed.
Yeah, I think he found one and carried it up there.
Okay. But I guess they both fucked up the timing or something, because one of them explodes. So Ben dives to protect Flash, but gets a giant gash in his chest.
Mm-hmm.
And it's drawn like pretty, not graphically, but like it's a big gash on his.
That's yeah, it's serious.
It's pretty grisly.
That's a hospital trip, even for Spider-Man.
Even for Spider-Man.
Cut back to now official real Spider-Man and Green Goblin. More fight, and Romita again is just fucking killing it on this fight sequence.
To quote Stan Lee and Mallrats, Norman is pumpkin bombing the hell out of everything in that one panel.
And Pete takes their masks off, and he's like, this isn't about Spider-Man versus Green Goblin. This is Peter versus Norman. It's a cool, badass moment.
Which is basically the exact same thing Dan Slott in Spider-Man 800.
Yeah. I want to come back to that, but I think it's
let's get Dan Slott on the podcast. I have so many questions for him.
Yeah.
That'd be a bad idea.
That's
well, we can't do it until way later because we have so much Dan Slott to cover.
Yeah.
But unless we can get him on twice. But
I'd love that.
I think it's interesting because Spider-Man, his two arch nemeses, and you can debate forever on which one is more important, are Norman Osborn and Otto Octavius.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like for Otto, and Matt, you may have a totally different interpretation. For Otto, it is more Doc Ock versus Spider-Man. I don't think Otto cares that much about Peter Parker.
I completely agree.
Even though, of course, he becomes Peter Parker and shows and like improves Peter Parker's life.
Even when he becomes Peter Parker, he doesn't care about Peter Parker. He only cares about being the superior Spider-Man.
Whereas
he kind of ruins Pete's life.
Whereas Norman Osborn is so much about the familial comparisons and the personal life.
I agree.
Even though at the same time, I feel that the battles between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin often do lean more into the costumes at the same time, and especially the Green Goblin and his like obsession and fetishization of his costume.
Sure.
Like I thought I pointed out earlier how he puts Peter Parker in the costume, and it's funny because I think Norman Osborn has done that like at least 3 times.
I was going to say that earlier, yeah.
Has had an unconscious Peter Parker and dressed him up.
I think he definitely has done that. I think even before this, he's done that.
Yeah. And Pete I guess he knocks out. Well, he doesn't knock out, but he knocks out Norman Osborn.
Mm-hmm.
And Ben's weird plan, if Ben just didn't have this idea, I think we'd be fine. But Ben wants to blow up the Oscorp building, which is where Osborn has been fighting them and everything. But it's a little dumb because Liz, who they're both totally cool with, owns the company. Norman is assumed dead, so he doesn't have any control over it. And like there was a whole mess with Multivex and all that stuff. But like Oscorp, they seem sort of fine at this point, and you're just gonna fuck over your friend by blowing up this building and put a lot of people out of jobs, et cetera, et cetera.
So Ben's final act is attempted terrorism.
Yeah. But of course, that's not how it works out. Ben gets impaled by the glider. Just the way that the Green Goblin died, but not quite, because he gets impaled by the glider, then falls dozens of stories through the air onto
Falls over 100 feet in the air.
But we don't even get to that immediately. We'll come back to Ben Reilly. Pete throws the bag full of pumpkin bombs at Norman, and Norman's conclusion is, I won because I dealt a blow to you, which was obviously the baby and then also Ben. And the Green Goblin will always be back, and then he disappears. So Norman Osborn is out of the story for now. And then we have the final words of Ben Reilly. He says to Peter Parker, "Take care of my niece, Peter. Tell her about her Uncle Ben." And it's so great.
I really love it. I really
hate it. At the same time, it works, but I hate it.
Why?
Because it's so stupid.
No, I think it's really good. Okay, it's stupid. I love it.
Poor little Ben.
No.
He's nothing but dust.
Yeah. And then things get awkward because Pete notices something happening to Ben's corpse and swings away with it. And Arthur Stacy is like, "Where's he going with the body?"
Spider-Man is taking the body. Why?
Again, not the first time you've done this. He did the same thing with both Captain Stacy and Gwen.
And sort of Ben as well, the first time.
Yeah.
And the skeleton. And so Ben turns to ash, he turns to ash, even though like they've totally melted before. And then he quickly, now that Ben is ash, he quickly runs to MJ, and they have a moment of just few words, lightly referencing the baby. And I thought this was a good scene as well.
It was good.
But the final panel doesn't entirely make sense. So she just had, from her perspective, I think she had a miscarriage. And
yes,
it was a result of like serious food poisoning. She's also obviously beyond physical, obviously all kinds of emotional stuff going on. But it's implied that the two of them leave the hospital and watch the sunrise together. Which I don't know if she would be leaving the bed for the next 24 hours.
Probably not. It's also weird they took her to where his ex died, but whatever.
Yeah.
It's a cute moment.
Yeah, and then the first epilogue of sorts is a wake for it's for Ben Reilly, but I guess also the baby. Like they don't explicitly reference the baby in this sequence.
It's more so Ben.
Yeah. And the weird thing here is Jimmy Six pulls away Peter and he says like, "Yo, I like that guy, Ben Reilly. And this Green Goblin guy, if he ever shows up again, I'll whack him. And also Spider-Man if he's involved." And so as I've said, Jimmy Six keeps appearing, particularly in this specific title, Adjective of Spider-Man, with Mackie and Romita. But I don't think I'm not sure that he ever intersects again with the Green Goblin, with Norman. And then he, in costume, goes to spread Ben's ashes at the Brooklyn Bridge. because
You say a hero can save us. I'm not gonna stay here and wait. Hold on to the wings of the eagles. Watch as they all fly away.
Is it bad if the only thing I can like think of when Peter does this is someone driving along the Brooklyn Bridge and just crashes the car windshield?
and then they crash.
They crash.
But then, all right, so he's spreading these ashes, and it's implied that it's after this wake thing, and I think it's sort of dark-ish. Again, I'm blind. I'm not good with time of day, but I feel like it's later in the day because then we get a next morning kind of deal. It is bright out, and somehow the ash has now wafted down into like downtown Manhattan. I don't understand this thing. It doesn't make sense.
It's symbolic.
Yeah.
And this is the like third epilogue of this fucking issue. We have Norman Osborn rising from the burnt rubble and murdering some insurance inspectors. And
He leaves the mask behind though, which is weird.
yeah, and he leaves the mask and he says that Norman has to do whatever's next. But I like this scene, like the few panels of him rising, like all creepy from the rubble, is really great.
Yeah. This was a really great issue.
Yep.
Yeah.
But apparently
And
it smells like a rancid barbecue.
yes, Norman's next appearance is in Spectacular Spider-Man 250, which I may squeeze in. I have to double check where it would be.
Okay.
And then he's in the arc Goblins at the Gate, it was in Spectacular, I believe. But that's Roger Stern kind of sort of trying to fix his Hobgoblin mess. Well, the mess that others made of the Hobgoblin. He did a little arc there, and then he did a separate miniseries. And then Norman is in the final chapter / Gathering of 5 epic, which is definitely we may squeeze something in between, but we'll definitely see him next there.
We're gonna read Gathering of 5.
Yes, it's like slightly not really related,
All right.
but it'll be a fun trip.
I hope so.
So let's kind of just talk generally. Like, what did you guys? Let's just cover this arc for now. How is this as a conclusion?
Well, the last issue alone is better than most of what we've read.
Yeah. Well, that's my thing. The last issue is really, really strong, but I don't think I really started enjoying the story until we got to that last issue. So we're talking about a 4-issue arc for me where really it's holds together from this one really, really good issue that's basically double-sized. So
My biggest problem is I don't care about Gaunt, and that battle with Gaunt is like 3 issues long.
yeah, that's the thing.
I think the major problem is it's like pacing and like the whole Robot Master reveal. It's supposed to be a loose hint towards Norman, but like you already had a dozen hints toward Norman throughout the issues that are totally fine. But like Robot Master is just awful. It takes 3 out of the 4 issues, but it's all the more frustrating because in those 3 issues, you do have some really great emotional moments of people who are not wearing costumes. And so if this was like maybe three standard size issues, call it that, because effectively this is kind of like 5 issues. If you fit this across 3 normal issues and paced it out well and got rid of all this shit, this would be really great.
Yeah,
I agree.
But I mean, this final issue, like, if you go to and search like top Spider-Man stories, and don't look at Newsarama, or like IGN and stuff like that. If you go to like those kinds of lists from like Spider-Man fan blogs, you'll often see Revelations in like a top 25, and just by itself. which it's kind of weird and interesting, but it's understandable where it's like if you've been a Spider-Man fan for like 40 years or whatever, you probably did begrudgingly sit through the entire Clone Saga. And it's like when you're looking back and it's like, what are the great Spider-Man stories? I don't know. Does this sort of fit?
Well, I mean, I've heard people that like read the like I've seen videos of people talking about the Clone Saga and read it during it and how they were so like the scene where Ben gets hit with the glider, people were like cheering. Like I've had people like videos seen people like where they cheered, talking about how they cheered when that happened. Like they were so happy that Ben was finally gone because they knew Peter was finally back.
Well, even that, and that goes back to kind of just the giant crux of Spider-Man and also a lot of superheroes, is so much of the fandom for these characters is generational. And with Spider-Man, you have a lot of focal points for that, where it's like marriage versus non-marriage, stuff like that. But there, at the same time of people cheering, there were legitimately people who really, I don't know how many and whatever, but there were people who actually like totally liked Ben Reilly as a replacement character and sort of expected it to be permanent. And you'll every once in a while see people pop up on like Reddit or like comment threads for like articles and stuff like that. Every once in a while people will be like, oh, I loved Ben Reilly. And it's funny because you like there was a little bit more of that somewhat recently because of course Ben Reilly was finally brought back and for like a year and a half was totally different from the way he is in everything we've been reading. And so you had people being like, I used to love Ben Reilly, and now he's finally back and is awful.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think just recently, just in the past couple episodes, I've grown to kind of like Ben, well, before I couldn't stand him. And I think in about 2 years or whatever, when we get to his inevitable return, I'm going to be kind of pissed off at the way that's handled.
Yeah.
Talking Clone Conspiracy and that whole.
Not only that, because when we do cover Clone Conspiracy, it's so damn long that it's going to take 2 episodes.
Yeah, and while we're talking a little bit about Dan Slott, then we sort of referenced this, but I think there's actually significant parallels between Spider-Man 75 and Amazing Spider-Man 800.
Yeah.
And it could be 100% coincidence, but it's definitely worth noting because, of course, in the last year of Dan Slott's Spider-Man, you had all of these Clone Saga shambling corpses being pulled out. And then also you have, Flash Thompson, the like, quote, like the brother kind of figure for Peter Parker dies in the big finale. Flash Thompson, his hair is blonde.
Well, and Flash Thompson also, he doesn't get injured because Ben saves him, but he also takes a dive in this issue.
Yeah.
You know?
And the super obvious point, obviously, it's Norman Osborn as the big bad, and similar things where he is going after and torturing all of the important people in Peter Parker's life. I feel like this issue handles the relationship between Peter Parker and Norman Osborn way better than 800. And I like 800.
I agree. I also like 800, but no, I agree.
But I think 800 has like a more macro, like more macro scale epic tone, because for better or worse, you also have like 10 other spider characters with like 2 lines each in that story.
Right.
And
well, and also similarly, that's wrapping up like a decade-long run, and this is wrapping up like a decade-long run.
It
feels like it.
Yeah. And also, some of these, we talked about how Norman Osborn is constantly dressing up Peter Parker and things like that. A lot of these scenes reminded me a ton of what is probably the next classic Green Goblin story, which is I think it is called A Death in the Family, right? Or what is it called? Isn't that what it's called? The Paul Jenkins arc, Jenkins and Ramos.
I think so.
I believe it is called A Death in the Family. But a lot of the like staging of the scenes in that reminded me a lot of this. Well, vice versa.
Right.
Where you have Peter Parker kind of subdued and Norman monologuing to him. He has him in the costume, but it takes a little bit more of a turn. Where in this issue, Norman's like, "Well, you killed my son. I'm going to kill you." At some point, he devolves. He's like, "Well, I can't kill you, but you killed my son, so let me just turn you into my son."
Right.
And eventually comes full circle and wants to kill him.
Well, and this issue is also prettier than that because Ramos, it's rough. No, you do know. No, you know.
No, you know.
I mean, I know, and I like that story.
Yes, it's a fine story, but I don't like his art.
But yeah, I mean, all right. Let's say, just pretend that this is one issue. Pretend this is the final issue. Where does this rank in your favorite Spider-Man stories? I'll just say that. Is it top 25?
Yeah.
Top 25? It might be.
It might be.
Top 10? Probably not. 25? Yeah.
Would it be in the top 15 then?
10's really hard.
10's
put it
really,
I don't think it makes 10 at all.
but 25? Probably.
Top 15.
I'd put it in top 15, but I don't know about these two.
I don't think it would squeeze in the top 15.
We could try and make a list and figure it out. I don't know.
Again, I was a big fan of Ben, so
I don't think Ben was. I'll say this: I am in the spotlight. I don't think he was a bad character. I think his stories were terrible, though.
Yeah, and I've said it a few times. I really like how the relationship with Pete ended up. Towards the end, there, where they were like brothers. That was really cool. It's cool to see Pete having a male friend because he has like none, especially now.
He's a slut.
Because he's a slut. He is.
But I don't know, like the ending is kind of brutal because Ben Reilly's final words are entirely pointless.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's wrapped up before he dies.
But he doesn't know it.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so emotional.
Yeah.
It's fucked up.
It hurts. It's really messed up. I love it.
So, does anyone have any final words? Otherwise, I'll close this out.
I'd say this: if you were to equate, I kind of like to compare this arc like this. If you order any type of, it's like a great undercard, or a terrible undercard, but a great main event. So, like, kind of just if you want to read this, just read Spider-Man 75.
Yeah.
And forget about everything else.
If you want to read the Clone Saga, just read Spider-Man 75.
Well, no. I said no, because Vince said focus on this arc. We're not doing full Clone Saga thoughts tonight.
No, but I mean the Clone Saga in general. Because, like, this issue, I think it tricked me into thinking I'm going to miss the Clone Saga.
You're not.
I'm not. But part of me is like, oh, man, you know?
No, it's finally fucking over.
I'm glad that the shitty issues are done, but
Well, that's what
a lot of the shitty issues that we had to deal with are done. There are more shitty issues to come, I know. But listen,
It's the conclusion of only season 2, Billy.
We've been doing this for 11 months?
49 weeks.
We've been doing this since last year.
January, I believe.
Oh, I thought we started in December, but regardless.
We might have started in December, but the tail end of it.
Yeah.
We started right after Christmas?
I think
That's
so.
Insane.
Yeah.
Why did we do this?
Well, we're not done. We're not done.
I know, but like, why?
Like I said, Billy, season 3 is coming.
No, listen, I know there's more shit we have to read. Why did we start this journey that we're now only part of the way through?
Billy, have you seen the outline for Crisis Cast?
Shut the fuck up.
All right, so that concludes the Clone Saga, sort of.
We're done.
Next episode, the big 50. It would be kind of cool if this episode was 50, but it didn't work out that way. But next episode, it sort of works that it's 50. Next episode is kind of our actual goodbye to the Clone Saga, because there are still a few loose ends or weird things that we have to read.
Well,
Even when it's over, it's not over.
And so next week, these are some of the things that we'll be reading and tackling. We will read the first issue of SpiderMan directly following the Clone Saga and see if there's any major status quo changes. It'll be DeMatteis back on SpiderMan, writing Spectacular. And we will be reading the one-shot 101 Ways to End the Clone Saga, which some of this may I actually have no idea what that one shot entirely is, and so this may be covered in that. But if it's not, I will also be going through some of the proposed solutions, which might not be included in that 101.
Are we going to do our full thoughts at the end of that episode then?
Yes, and we will also be reading. There's a one shot called I think it's called Dead Man's Hand, which kind of attempts to clear up some of the Norman Osborn missing gap period. We will talk about our kind of final thoughts on the whole Clone Saga, and I'll try and put some numbers together. We'll see how many pages we read, definitely how many issues we read. Pages, I might have to pull my hair out to do those calculations.
No, I said I wanted pages.
I'll try.
We should have cake. We should have cake for this next episode.
A cake? Is that what you
Yeah, we
said?
should have cake. Yeah.
Well, wait, could we possibly film something this weekend? We will be all in the same spot for the first time in a while.
Perhaps.
Sure.
So be on the lookout for that. Thanks for watching this episode, going this far on the journey with us.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.